Hockenheim in West Germany, the German Grand Prix, round 12 of the 1982 World Motor Racing Championship. And a tragic day here yesterday for Ferrari, because the French driver Didier Peroni, the current World Championship leader, was very badly injured in a horrific accident when his car collided in pouring rain with Alain Prost's Renault. The Ferrari somersaulted, Didier Peroni was trapped in the car for half an hour and was finally taken to a hospital in Heidelberg near here with both his legs broken. There he is at the top of the World Championship table, 9 points ahead of John Watson, but now in that hospital. The latest news is slightly better than yesterday. There were worries that one of his legs might have to be amputated. We hear that that is now not the case, and we are hoping that Didier Peroni will make a total recovery. Pole position therefore empty, and there's another man missing from the grid, this man, Niki Lauda, because on Friday he had this accident on the right-hander leading out of the stadium in the McLaren number 8. He spun into the catch fences. He wasn't hurt, except one of his wrists was badly wrenched, an injury very similar to the injury that Nigel Mansell has suffered from recently. And Niki Lauda has decided that he's not going to start. He's going to save that wrist for his home Austrian Grand Prix a week hence. So 25 cars on the grid, pole position where there should be Didier Peroni's Ferrari, alas empty, and that means that the cars that were second and third fastest in practice, the two Renaults, are once again on the front of the grid. Alain Prost there. At the very front, René Arnoux just behind him, and as they go up on their warm-up lap, you see the very distinctive shape of the Hockenheim circuit, with the stadium section at the bottom, the twists, the hairpin into the stadium, then the long banana-shaped section with this year 3 chicanes to slow down the immense high speeds of these turbocharged cars. The chicane on the first straight, the chicane on the second straight being joined by a new chicane at the top, Ostkurve, and now the cars returning from their warm-up lap back to take up their positions on the grid. The two Renaults, Prost, there you see Peroni's position empty at the top left, so it's Prost and Arnoux, then it's Piquet in the Turbo Brabham, row 3, Tambay in the sole Ferrari, and Riccardo Patrese in the other Turbo Brabham. Row 4 is Alboreto's Tyrrell and De Cesaris in the Alfa, then Keke Rosberg and John Watson on row 5, and the rest of the field now lining up behind. A hot, humid and muggy day. Alain Prost, so anxious to do better than the second place that he had in France, which didn't make him happy. Red and green, the field away, a marvellous start from behind by Eddie Cheever coming through along the pit lane, but it's Alain Prost who has to fall back behind René Arnoux. René Arnoux it is, who takes the lead. The Brabham is third of Nelson Piquet. Michele Alboreto's made a good start because he's in fourth place. As for the first of 45 laps, they go away up to the first chicane at 175 miles an hour now through the right-hand curve up towards the chicane, here into the chicane, and Piquet goes through to second. Piquet is second. It's Renault, Brabham, Renault, Arnoux, Piquet, Prost, then it's Tambay, then it's De Cesaris, Alboreto, and there's Eddie Cheever right up there after that wonderful start that he made. One of the ATS's, Winkelhock, getting pushed onto the curb there. Now the second chicane, and still it's René Arnoux, Nelson Piquet, and Alain Prost, then Patrick Tambay, and then the first non-turbo, which is the Alpha of De Cesaris. The rest of the field streaming through that Ostkurve chicane. That's the new chicane, on down the final long straight out of that right-hand curve, down towards chicane number 3, and look at Piquet pushing Arnoux. Piquet pushing Arnoux very, very hard indeed for the lead. And once again, we wonder if the Brabham is going to make the pit stop that we've been wondering about for the last 2 races. Is the Brabham running on half-full tanks? Nelson Piquet pushing Arnoux very hard as they come down into the stadium for the first time. That's Patrese darting out of the slipstream. That was Keke Rosberg. Derek Warwick further down in number 35. That's the Tolman. Derek Daly moving up behind Nigel Mansell, behind Elio De Angelis there. But the leader's already in the stadium. And here they are with Arnoux in front of those packed grandstands. Arnoux ahead of the Brabham with the German BMW engine. of Piquet. The Ferrari is 4th, De Cesare is 5th, Patrese now 6th, Alboreto 7th, Cheever is still 8th and going very well indeed. There's his teammate well down the field, that was Jacques Laffite. And the rest of the field now on their second lap and going away from us through into the trees. The weather mercifully dry after the tremendously wet conditions we had yesterday, the conditions in which Peroni had that accident. And Piquet's done it into the first chicane on lap 2, and Nelson Piquet is the leader. Piquet leads the two Renaults, Arnoux 2nd, Prost 3rd, Tambay 4th, De Cesare is 5th, Patrese 6th, Alboreto twitching 7th, Cheever, then it was Rosberg, and the rest of the field coming through this tight first chicane, and Nelson Piquet and the Brabham BMW at lap 2 is ahead and pulling away on the long haul now away from the second chicane and coming down to the third one. Piquet pulling away from René Arnoux. René Arnoux is out of that slipstream. Prost is falling back into the clutches of Tambay, and there's Patrese moving up. The turbocharged Brabham BMW power taking Patrese ahead of De Cesaris in the non-turbo Alpha, and so we've got turbos 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a Brabham, it's 2 Renaults, it's a Ferrari, and it's another Brabham. The 5 turbos in the first 5 places, and the only other turbo in the race, which is Derek Warwick's Tolman, down there in midfield. In front of the packed grandstands, into the Sachs curve, the left-hander, this is Riccardo Patrese in 5th place after having made the slowest start of the turbos. Patrese with De Cesaris on his tail over the brow into the start-finish straight. And his teammate, Nelson Piquet, moving ahead in the lead, ahead of the 2 Renaults. And we've got Eddie Cheever coming into the pits. Now that's jolly bad luck, because Cheever made that wonderful start. The new Ligier has not been a successful car so far this season, but the Italian-based American Eddie Cheever in the pits after that wonderful charge in the first couple of laps. It looks like a skirt replacement. I think they're replacing one of the skirts. And there we see Mauro Baldisarro's just going out of the picture, which had a very delayed start from the pits. It got stalled on the grid. But Piquet, through the chicane, through the third chicane, that is, and on down, Mauro Baldi in front of him to be lapped. And you can see, even on the telephoto lens of the television camera, back in the heat, in the shimmering heat, the 2 Renaults falling back and falling back. Nelson Piquet absolutely running away with this race with the Brabham BMW, and of course very popular with the German crowd, because although it's a British car with a Brazilian driver, it's a German engine. Into the corner, onto the start-finish straight, the Opel Curva. That's Mauro Baldi in front of him. In fact, Baldi has dived into the pits as over the start-finish line goes Nelson Piquet once more, and on into the right-hander. That was the corner where Niki Lauda crashed, and away from the stadium section out into the forest. And there's the Renault of René Arnoux. There is Alain Prost. There is Patrick Tambay, and look how Patrick Tambay in 4th place is closing on Alain Prost. So that's Arnoux in 2nd place coming into the first chicane. A tight one, this, 2nd gear, 85 miles an hour, and away through the ever-curving right-hander that leads up to the Ostkörper. This used to be a very, very fast 5th gear corner. It's now a 3rd gear chicane. Piquet is through before the leading Renault comes in, and that's Manfred Winkelhock, the German Manfred Winkelhock in the German ATS, and he's getting out. And a sigh from the crowd here around my commentary position high up in the grandstand, because Winkelhock, very, very popular, of course. German car, German driver, and Nelson Piquet crosses the start-finish line yet again, and there's the Renault, and this lead ever greater. We'll put the stopwatch on it next time, but I make it by rough hand timing at least 5 seconds. That's Jarier off. That is the Azella of Jean-Pierre Jarier, and he has parked it. Frenchman in the Italian car, Jean-Pierre Jarier, out of the race. And And this is lap 9. 8 laps completed. This is the 9th lap, and Tambay now really putting the pressure on René Arnoux. He's passed Prost, and he's really pushing Arnoux. This is the battle for second place now. Nelson Piquet away and out of view. And the hitherto so powerful Renault, the Renault that was the car that always seemed to have more power than everybody else from its turbocharged engine, vanquished on this power circuit by the power of the BMW turbo, and now about to be vanquished surely by the power of the Ferrari. Allegedly 720 horsepower from 1.5 litres, little V6 turbocharged engine in the Ferrari, a similar V6 with twin turbos on the Renault. So Tambay really tucked into the slipstream of René Arnoux' Renault, and he's not quite close enough to do anything about it on this lap. This is lap 9 as they come into the stadium and into the Sachs Curva, and closing up under braking goes the Ferrari. And remember, this is the only Ferrari in the race because of Didier Peroni's accident yesterday. And Patrick Tambay, the man who joined the Ferrari team on the death or shortly after the death of Gilles Villeneuve, and doing absolutely everything that anybody could expect of him. 3/4 of a second, that gap, it doesn't look very much. 9 laps completed now. This is lap 10, and still René Arnoux clinging on to second place by 3/4 of a second as Nelson Piquet builds his lead, and as fourth man Alain Prost watches from behind. Still in 5th place, it's Riccardo Patrese. And John Watson coming up into the picture now. John Watson is now in 6th place, but this is Tambay still pushing René Arnoux. That's the Ostkurve chicane. Through the trees, and now on the long haul, 155, 160, 170 miles an hour, as we see into the pits, once again Andrea de Cesaris out of luck. The Alfa Romeo, which has so often gone quickly in the early stages, and Tambay's doing it! Tambay's alongside, and Arnoux has to give best on that drag, up to, as I was telling you, 180 miles an hour before they hit the brakes and come down to 4th gear, then to 3rd, for that 3rd chicane. And Tambay got alongside Arnoux. There was nothing Arnoux could do about it. And so now the Renaults are 3rd and 4th, the Ferrari of Patrick Tambay is 2nd, and still Nelson Piquet pulling out this lead. There he is, Piquet, and it's 17.7 seconds after only 11 laps. Now that gives you some idea of just how Nelson Piquet is absolutely dominating this race, and he is keeping the pressure on. Normally, with a lead that big after so short a time, in fact, you see his fastest lap so far, he's averaging, despite those tight chicanes, 133 miles an hour. There he is in chicane 1, on the Bremskurve, going up to the top of the circuit, and he is certainly showing no signs of easing off and just being content with preserving the cushion. For 17 seconds, nearly 18 seconds now, the cushion between himself and the new second man, Patrick Tambay. He is keeping the pressure on because we believe that he is indeed on half full fuel tanks. This is lap 11. The figure on your screen shows laps completed, and halfway through the 45 laps we think he'll be into the pits. 15.9 seconds, that's the official gap, but that was at the end of 10 laps. My unofficial hand timing makes it more than that now, as we see Patrick Tambay and René Arnoux lapping Elio De Angelis. And as we were saying, a pit stop surely for Nelson Piquet in prospect. It was threatened at the British Grand Prix, but Piquet retired with a mechanical failure within the first 10 laps. It was threatened at the French Grand Prix, and once again Piquet and Patrese both retired. So today surely we're going to see a pit stop for Piquet. Now, does that mean that this man that you see leading this group here, this is Patrick Tambay, the blue helmet in the red car, the Ferrari, now in 2nd place and pulling away from that man, number 16, René Arnoux, still being followed by Elio De Angelis, whom he's just lapped. Does that mean that Tambay will be able to take the lead when the Brabham stops? Or will the Brabham be able to pull out a big enough lead to be able to come into the pits, take on fresh tyres and fresh fuel, and be back into the race without losing the lead? We calculate that Piquet will need something like a 35-second lead, and that is Alain Prost, the Renault that has slipped back into 4th place. Alain Prost, 2nd in the French Grand Prix a couple of weeks ago, behind his teammate René Arnoux, and it was Prost who thought he should have been allowed to win. Prost in the pits, his engine hasn't been sounding quite right for the last few laps, and I think that's some sort of engine problem. But no problems at all for Nelson Piquet. This is lap 12 as he comes back into the stadium in front of those enormous concrete grandstands, absolutely crammed with German enthusiasts. Out of the tight Sachs-Curve, twisting through this stadium section, over the brow at the Opel Curve, onto the start-finish straight there. Very neat and tidy, little twitch from the car as he comes onto the start-finish straight. And as he goes past my box now, the sound of that slightly flat-sounding turbocharged engine, the BMW, the turbocharger giving it a quieter exhaust note than we're used to hearing from the Cosworths, the Alfa Romeos, and particularly those raucous-sounding Ligiers. But nevertheless, lots and lots of power, and it sounds absolutely right as Piquet goes on his way on lap 13 into the Bremskurve, 2nd gear now, up into 3rd now, up into 4th, up into 5th, and briefly getting up to 160 miles an hour before he's on the brakes once more, 4th gear, 3rd gear now, and turn it into the Ostkurve. One apex clipped, 2nd apex clipped, and neatly away. And Piquet keeping the pressure on, but determined not to make any mistakes, just driving absolutely at 9.5 tenths, not taking any risks, but building this lead and building this lead. And I make it now 20 seconds that he has pulled out on his 13th lap from Patrick Tambay. René Arnoux still in 3rd place. Alain Prost had disappeared, and I think we've got a trouble for the other Brabham. I think that Riccardo Patrese's Brabham is late. That in the pits is one of the Ligiers. That looks like Eddie Cheever back in again. Yes, it is Eddie Cheever back in the pits. You can see him on the right with his distinctive helmet, Cheever out of the car. So not a happy day for the American, despite that wonderful start we saw earlier. But Piquet completes now 13 laps, starts on his 14th of the 45. The sharp nose of the Brabham BMW. Of course, Brabham started off the season using the faithful Cosworth V8 while they were, in fact, their first race was with the BMW in South Africa. They then went back to the Ford for a little while, but there's no doubt at all that for all its reliability problems so far, it can't be long before this turbocharged Brabham engine is absolutely right, and it looks, to the delight of the BMW executives here, as though the day that it all comes right for the Brabham BMW could well be today. Up into the Ostkurve chicane. Once again, absolutely neat, clipping those 2 apexes, just missing the curve coming out. And Nelson Piquet, and there indeed is his teammate Riccardo Patrese, and you see the smoke from the back of the car. Riccardo Patrese's race is clearly run. So that car, identical to the leading car of Nelson Piquet, identical to number 1 is Brabham number 2, Riccardo Patrese, out of the race with what looked like some sort of very serious engine malady. So just as we were saying, has the BMW engine found its reliability at last? 21.1 seconds the gap between leader Piquet and second man Patrick Tambay. But just as we were saying, is the Brabham BMW reliable at last? Riccardo Patrese, the Italian number 2 in the team, is out of the race. So Piquet, no doubt scanning his pit board as he goes past the start-finish line, past the pits, and off on his 16th lap now. and still Patrick Tambay in second place. Still René Arnoux is third. John Watson now promoted to fourth place with the loss of Patrese, and Keke Rosberg is next up. Keke Rosberg is in fifth place, and we've got Michele Alboreto in the Tyrrell sixth, with a splendid run from Jacques Laffite. We saw Chiva's problems, but Jacques Laffite, Chiva's teammate in the Ligier team, going very strongly in the new Ligier, and he has now come up into seventh place, and he is closing on Michele Alboreto, who is sixth, so perhaps a chance of some championship points there for Jacques Laffite. And this is lap 17, coming up to the completion of the 17th lap. Nelson Piquet crosses the start-finish line once again, and again we start the stopwatches and we look away to await the appearance of the Ferrari. There he is, the Ferrari is in the stadium just as Piquet leaves it. Patrick Tambay, smooth as ever, not as quick as Piquet, but so smooth, with the whole responsibility of the Ferrari team on him. That's Raoul Boesel in the march, the only march in the race. Jochen Mass didn't start, handed his drive over to Rupert Keegan because Mass is still feeling the effects of his very unpleasant accident from the French Grand Prix 2 weeks ago. Rupert Keegan couldn't qualify the car, so Raoul Boesel in the only march in the race, and the gap is 23 seconds at the completion of 17 laps. There is the second man, Patrick Tambay, 23 seconds down on Nelson Piquet. So Piquet looking very, very good indeed. We said he needs a bit more than half a minute to make this pit stop and still come out in the lead, but the pace he's driving, even if he loses the lead, there's Boesel again, there is Tambay, even if Piquet loses the lead, even if he falls back into second place, or even to third place behind Arnoux, John Watson is a long way down in fourth place, and I think that Piquet is going to be able to make this pit stop. And even if he comes back into second or third place, if he keeps up this tremendous pace, then he's going to be able to get back into the lead. So things looking good for the Brabham BMW Turbo at the moment. 24 seconds now, the official gap. 24 seconds the gap as Piquet comes into the stadium for the 18th time through the Opel Curva, over the start-finish line, 18 laps completed. And the reigning world champion looking as though everything is going absolutely his way, working his way through the back markers. That's Eliseo Salazar's ATS ahead of him, Winkelhock's ATS we've already seen, and there's another fast lap for Piquet. 1:54, an average of 133 miles an hour. That was in fact the time we saw earlier, done on lap 7. Piquet coming up now to lap Eliseo Salazar into the first chicane, just a little bit up the curb, and on now towards the Ostkurve. This is lap 19, and Piquet with this enormous lead. That was a glimpse of Prost, who has restarted, and he's lapping Salazar now as they come into the chicane, and Salazar's hit him. Oh, goodness gracious me, Salazar has taken the leader out. Piquet lapping Salazar, Salazar hit him, and Piquet's furious. Salazar out of the car on the right of the picture, walking away, and Piquet is very angry indeed. Well, not a pretty scene, but a very, very angry world champion. There's Bernie Ecclestone. He's just had the news, and Ecclestone knows now that both his cars are out, and that ATS is still in the middle of the road. There's part of the safety barrier still in the middle of the road. The marshals now moving the car. They've got a course car up there. Piquet is walking away, and Salazar is there too. Salazar with his helmet off. Piquet throws his gloves onto the ground, and an unhappy-looking Salazar walks away. We're going to see it again. Piquet coming through on the inside, seemingly well clear, but Salazar, apparently leaving his braking rather late, goes for the apex. Front right of Salazar hits rear left of Piquet. Piquet's in the barriers, Salazar's in the barriers, and the world champions out of the race. So once again, the Brabham pit stop that we've been looking forward to now for 3 races. There is the new leader, Patrick Tambay. They've moved the ATS already, the efficient marshals have got the ATS out of the way, and the new leader, Patrick Tambay, and once again, after waiting for 3 Grand Prix, we're still not going to see the Brabham pit stop. That's Derek Warwick going very slowly. Derek Warwick and the Tolman going very slowly indeed as Tambay goes through into the 3rd chicane for the 20th time in this 45-lap race. And so, Nelson Piquet is out. Patrick Tambay is the leader for Ferrari. René Arnoux is in 2nd place. I make it about 6 seconds down. René Arnoux in the Renault is now 2nd, and that promotes John Watson into 3rd place. John Watson, who is currently lying 2nd in the World Championship, 9 points behind poor Didier Peroni, who, of course, can't now score because of his injuries. And that's good news for John Watson in 3rd place, but it's good news for Ferrari that this man, after such an unhappy weekend, 5.4 seconds, the gap there you see between Tambay and Arnoux. Watson a further half a minute down. Rosberg, Alboreto and Laffite in the order they were before, but all promoted 1, thanks to that skirmish between the Chilean driver Eliseo Salazar and the now very unhappy Nelson Piquet of Brazil. So Tambay doing something to restore Ferrari's shattered confidence, doing everything that could be expected of him, driving a smooth race, and now being in the lead of the race. Ferrari number 27, the number, of course, that Gilles Villeneuve carried. And Tambay, the Frenchman who dropped out of Formula One racing altogether at the beginning of the year, unhappy with the politics, went off to pursue his racing career in America, only to be called back. That's Roberto Guerrero being lapped by Tambay. That's where the accident happened a lap ago. This now, in fact, lap 23. And Tambay called back into the Grand Prix circuit, and this is only his 4th race for Ferrari. He started in Holland, where he finished out of the points. Then it was the British Grand Prix, where he finished a splendid 3rd. He finished also in the French Grand Prix in the points 2 weeks ago, and now he's leading the German Grand Prix. Patrick Tambay, who has never won a Grand Prix in his career, 52 Grand Prix, this is his 53rd. So for the 23rd time into the Sachs-Curve, little twitch from the Ferrari. Goodyear tyres this year. Ferrari, who of course used Michelin's last year. The Renault in 2nd place is on Michelin's. And the weather here, hot and humid, but perhaps not as hot as the tyre manufacturers were fearing. It can be very, very hot indeed at Hockenheim. But so far, tyre wear apparently not a factor. John Watson 3rd, Keke Rosberg 4th, and we've got a splendid battle, you're not seeing it on screen, between Jacques Laffite and Michele Alboreto, and Jacques Laffite has in fact taken Michele Alboreto. The Ligier of Laffite has gone into 5th place ahead of Alboreto. Next up in 7th place is Derek Daly. Bruno Giacomelli is 8th, and Mark Surer in the Arrows, the Swiss driver, nice to see him going strongly. He is 9th ahead of Brian Henton. Lap 24. Arnoux laps Roberto Guerrero. Quite a blow for Renault that not only has Prost retired because he is now out, we saw him come back briefly, but Prost is now out of the race. We understand the trouble was fuel injection, so not only have gremlins raised their heads again, but in Arnoux car, which is still clearly running well, the Renault simply hasn't got the power to contend with this car, the Ferrari, with its latest version of the engine allegedly producing 720 horsepower. That's an awful lot of horses from 1.5 litres. for the 24th time onto the start-finish straight. And down here beneath, and that is Boesel. That is Raoul Boesel. And that's very much the end of his race. A shredded tyre, clearly damaged suspension as well, and so the Brazilian Raoul Boesel is out, the only march in the race, because the other car, driven first by Jochen Mass and then by Rupert Keegan, didn't qualify. And there is John Watson, our third place man. John Watson, currently second in the World Championship. The Marlboro McLaren looking slightly different at the side, with its livery changed for this German race, because no cigarette advertising allowed in Germany. So instead of the normal livery down the side, the little strip of vertical black lines covering over the area where normally the name of the sponsor would be, but the unmistakable colours of John Watson's McLaren up there in a splendid third place. He's a long way behind the turbos, but nobody expected a non-turbocharged car to win here, and John Watson leading the non-turbocharged race, as it were, and looking set fair to do his World Championship points tally a lot of good. 4 points is what third place would earn him. So John Watson up into the Ostkurve now, and currently 30 points in the championship, 5 points ahead of Alain Prost, who is already out of the race, 6 points ahead of Niki Lauda, who hasn't started today, and 9 points behind Didier Peroni, who of course hasn't started today. So Watson looking extremely comfortable there in third place. And that is Derek Daly's car parked there. Derek Daly, the Williams, parked by the side of the road. Clearly some sort of mechanical failure. And that's a shame, because Derek Daly, although he was just out of the points in 7th place, Daly now out. And the other Williams still going, Keke Rosberg still running now in 4th place. John Watson in 3rd place. Car bouncing on its suspension as he comes into the stadium section, down towards the Saxe-Curve. The Belfast driver, who has already had 2 splendid wins this season. 4 wins so far for McLaren, 2 for Watson, 2 for Lauda. The reconstituted, rejuvenated McLaren team. And that is Keke Rosberg there, closing on one of the Ligiers. Now, is that Chiva who has rejoined the race, or is it Jacques Laffite? It's Jacques Laffite. So Jacques Laffite is in front of Keke Rosberg indeed. So on lap 28, Jacques Laffite is past Keke Rosberg, and that's a magnificent effort by the Frenchman in this still very unproven and not so far this competitive Tambay Ligier with the V12 Matra engine, and Keke Rosberg having to give best to the Frenchman. So Jacques Laffite is 4th, Keke Rosberg is now up to 5th, Michele Alboreto is still there in 6th place. There is Laffite into the Ostkurve chicane, with Keke Rosberg having to eat his exhaust smoke. And in that group, we see Nigel Mansell. There he is, number 12, Nigel Mansell, whose birthday it is today, 28 years old. Nigel Mansell, who's already had a stop, I gather, to replace a damaged skirt, and Nigel Mansell still running with this very uncomfortable wrist. The Fittipaldi there of Chico Serra, then it's Nigel Mansell, then Jacques Laffite coming up to lap him with Keke Rosberg behind them. Chico Serra, the Brazilian, and the Fittipaldi Ford, and Nigel Mansell nearly lapped there in the Saxe-Curve. Nigel Mansell just staying ahead of Jacques Laffite. Laffite, as ever, carrying his familiar number 26, follows Nigel Mansell onto the start-finish straight. This is lap 29, the completion of 29 laps, and Laffite goes past Mansell, so puts Mansell between himself and the pursuing Keke Rosberg. And Laffite's in trouble. Laffite is off. Laffite is back on again. Now, that looked to me like, we're going to see it again, that I think was just a mistake by Laffite. He's just lapped Mansell. He's offline. He's on the dirt. He manages to keep the car out of the fences, and Mansell goes by again, and Keke Rosberg goes by. This is Chico Serra in the Fittipaldi number 20. There is Keke Rosberg now back into fourth place, with Nigel Mansell behind him a lap down. And Laffite is back in the race again. There he is. But no doubt extremely angry with himself. He got offline, napping Nigel Mansell's Lotus, and that was enough to put him on the dirt, and that was enough to let Keke Rosberg, the Finn, get back into fourth place. Rosberg now passes Chico Serra. Rosberg, Serra in the Fittipaldi, Mansell in the Lotus, coming down into the third chicane now. Keke Rosberg lying second in the non-turbo race. John Watson still leads the non-turbos in third place. As we watch Rosberg, followed by the Fittipaldi of Serra, followed by Mansell, coming down into the stadium, over the bumps. This is lap 30, and into the Sachs curve. And Rosberg with no hope of catching John Watson at the moment, but just content to earn his championship points. Fourth place will net him 3 points. Rosberg currently in fifth position, and of course fifth position in the championship, I should say. And there is our leader, Patrick Tambay. Tambay into the Sachs curve for the 30th time. This twisting section in front of the grandstands, a wonderful view here, the Ferrari flags waving, and also there's a spot in the grandstand far below my commentary position which is absolutely full of French flags, and every time Tambay goes by, the French flags wave. It's an Italian car, but of course it's a French driver, and a lot of thoughts must be with Didier Peroni lying in his hospital bed 30 miles away in Heidelberg with those shattered legs, and he doesn't know it, presumably, but Patrick Tambay is doing everything he can to restore the Ferrari name. That's Bruno Giacomelli about to be lapped. Bruno Giacomelli, who is now in seventh place. Giacomelli is seventh in the Alfa Romeo, and Tambay is coming up to lap him as we now go into the final 1/3 of this 45 lap race. This is lap 31. That is Mark Sura's Arrows. Sura in 8th place now. Mark Sura, who twice has had horrifying frontal accidents, twice damaged his legs severely, but this very pleasant Swiss driver never gives up, and back from his 2 consecutive Kyle Army accidents and driving extremely strongly in the Arrows, currently in 8th place. Giacomelli in the Alfa number 23, Patrick Tambay in the Ferrari number 27, into the Sachs curve. This is lap 31. And the Alfa Romeos so often have been quick this year, but unreliable. Giacomelli not so quick today, but so far in a way much more reliable. The Cesaris already out of the race earlier, and Alfa Romeo themselves have a V8 turbocharged engine under development. We know that the Williams team, there is Keke Rosberg, are looking at a turbo for next year. We're told of a rumour that Michele Alboreto's team manager, there he is, number 3 Alboreto, that Ken Tyrrell has got a mock-up of a turbocharged engine sitting in the corner of his workshop, and clearly next year must be a turbo year. John Watson currently in 3rd place. We know that the McLaren team will be using a Porsche turbo engine next year, and Michele Alboreto doing a splendid job in the Tyrrell. The blue car carrying virtually no sponsorship now. Ken Tyrrell continuing in motor racing as he's been in Formula One for so long, but with very little backing now, having to do most of the financing himself. And nevertheless, Alboreto and indeed Brian Henton, who's the number 2 driver, who's still going strongly, although he's out of the points at the moment. That's the gap, and Alboreto is closing on Rosberg, 7.8 seconds. And that is the battle for 4th place. Alboreto is 5th, Nigel Mansell behind him a lap down. Michele Alboreto, the young Italian, who's one of the finds of this season. Alboreto is 5th, and he's closing on Rosberg, who is 4th. I think actually Rosberg's engine is not quite all it should be. It sounds slightly flat, and Jacques Laffite had very little difficulty in getting past Rosberg before he then threw it away and went off. And Laffite indeed has slipped down behind Alboreto again. I think he's probably damaged a skirt with that moment when he went off. So Alboreto now in 5th place and closing on Keke Rosberg. This is lap 35. The long haul down to the chicane. This is the straight where Didier Peroni had his accident in pouring rain yesterday. Just where Alboreto is now, he touched Alain Prost's car. Plumes of spray then coming up from the cars. Visibility very difficult. Today, mercifully, a dry day. And Alboreto into the Sachs curve as Keke Rosberg comes into the Opel curve just a couple of corners ahead. The neat rounded contours of the Maurice Philippe designed Tyrrell. Nigel Mansell still following Alboreto, and Nigel Mansell indeed, after that earlier stop to replace a skirt, going extremely well. Remember, his wrist is still not all that it should be ever since his Canadian Grand Prix accident in June, but Mansell on his birthday going well, and the gap's 7.8, so Rosberg keeping the distance, if anything increasing it slightly. There is Keke Rosberg, number 6, and Rosberg managing to fend off the attentions of Michele Alboreto. Rosberg in 4th place. That's Giacomelli past Laffite. Bruno Giacomelli is now ahead of Jacques Laffite, so obviously Laffite's handling problems have got worse. René Arnoux in 2nd place is now just behind Laffite. Laffite keeps over to the right of the road, and Arnoux goes neatly by as they go out of the Ostkurve section. But Bruno Giacomelli is now ahead of Jacques Laffite and indeed pulling away. That's the Ostkurve chicane. Giacomelli through, René Arnoux through, Giacomelli a lap behind the leader already and about to be lapped by second man René Arnoux. This is lap 36. 9 laps to go after this one. And Bruno Giacomelli in the red and white Alpha, the V12 3-litre, normally aspirated car, on the brakes, down into the chicane, up through the gearbox again. And that's the gap now between Giacomelli and Laffite, and that's an outdated caption because, as you can see, Giacomelli now ahead of Laffite as René Arnoux doesn't lap Giacomelli. Arnoux decided that discretion was the better part of valour there. He's not catching Tambay. He doesn't want to throw anything away, and in fact Laffite is in trouble because Chico Serra goes by. He's a lap done, but Marc Surer goes through, and Marc Surer is on the same lap as Jacques Laffite. So Marc Surer in the orange arrows is now past Jacques Laffite. Laffite, who got so splendidly up to 4th place, now slipping away down the field. Bruno Giacomelli therefore now in 6th place. Giacomelli up into the points. John Watson still 3rd, Keke Rosberg still 4th, Patrick Tambay of course still the leader. Tambay comfortably ahead of René Arnoux in 2nd place. Watson is 3rd. There is Arnoux, the 2nd man, coming up to lap Bruno Giacomelli, the 6th man. Marc Surer now in 7th place, and Laffite demoted down to 8th. And Arnoux stuck in the slipstream of Giacomelli. Now he goes by, and very sensibly Arnoux has taken his time, passing Bruno Giacomelli, he doesn't obviously want to have the sort of misunderstanding with the car that he laps that we've already seen poor Nelson Piquet have. 20.5 seconds is the gap between Arnoux. There you see how much Giacomelli has pulled ahead of Laffite, but in fact Marc Surer is now between them as well. But 20 comfortable seconds between the leader Patrick Tambay, the second man René Arnoux. John Watson a long way down, but in nevertheless a very comfortable third place. Keke Rosberg is fourth. As Patrick Tambay completes 37 laps through the final corner onto the start-finish straight. 37 laps completed. This is lap 38 of the 45. Tambay keeping a careful, even pace, obviously now wanting to preserve his car, preserve his tyres, pick his way carefully around the back mark. And that's John Watson! That is the third place man, John Watson, and he is comprehensively out of the race. And that's very, very sad indeed for John Watson's World Championship hopes, because Watson was absolutely doing as well as anybody could have expected in a turbo-dominated race. Watson was holding a comfortable third place. That's 4 vital championship points thrown away, and that was at the Ostkurve. Laffite has now stopped to the pits. Look, they're looking at the skirt. So Laffite's handling problems obviously have driven him into the pits. There is Keke Rosberg, and Rosberg now our new third place man. But how very, very sad for 36-year-old John Watson from Belfast. John Watson out of the race after having held that third place for so very long, and Keke Rosberg of Finland in the Williams therefore moves into third place. And that promotes Michele Alboreto into fourth, and Bruno Giacomelli to fifth, and we've now got Marc Surer, the Swiss in the arrows, coming up into sixth place. And to show the sort of domination that Ferrari have stamped on this race with their single entry for Patrick Tambay, Keke Rosberg in third place is about to be lapped. This is lap 41, 4 laps to go after this one. And Keke Rosberg in the white and green car, number 6, has the leader in his mirrors as they go into the Ostkurve. Patrick Tambay about to put everybody except second man René Arnoux a lap behind him. And of course at Hockenheim it's a jolly long lap. It's 4.2 miles here. Tambay sitting in the slipstream, he's not in a hurry, and he wisely waits as they go into the third chicane, letting Rosberg take the line. On now on the final straight, 165 miles an hour here. Rosberg keeps to one side, but Tambay says, no, not this lap, thanks very much. So Rosberg moves back to the left of the road, takes his line into the stadium. Rosberg in third place in the Williams. Tambay the leader with Ferrari number 27. And remember, this is only Tambay's 4th Grand Prix for Ferrari, and if it all goes well for him here, if he doesn't have the sort of bad luck that John Watson's had, then he's going to win his 4th race for Ferrari. And it was bad luck for John Watson, because we've just had a message up here from the McLaren pit. Apparently John has reported having had a lift home in one of the Porsche course cars through the infield, that something broke as he went into the Ostkurve chicane. Something at the front right-hand side of the car, he says he doesn't know what broke. Tambay is past Rosberg. Tambay, therefore, a lap ahead of everyone except Arnoux, and John Watson out of the race from third place with apparently a front suspension failure. 17 seconds is that gap, so Tambay has allowed Arnoux to close within 3 seconds. That obviously was while he was following Keke Rosberg and not being in a hurry to overtake. But this is lap 42, only 3 laps to go, and all Tambay has got to do is keep it on the island, hope that nothing breaks, and Rosberg sitting quite happily in his mirrors, himself obviously very satisfied to be in third place. I was talking to Rosberg before the race, and all he could say was, I hope all the turbos break down, because that's the only way I'm going to get into the first 6 in this race. Well, there he is in the first 3, and Prost has retired with an engine failure. Nelson Piquet has indeed retired, although with, he would say, a brain failure by another driver. And Patrese in the other Brabham has retired with an engine failure. So it has been a bad day for the turbos. Derek Warwick, incidentally, the Tolman turbo is still going, although he's well done after a pit stop. And here's a turbo that's still going. This is the second place man, René Arnoux, the winner of the French Grand Prix a fortnight ago, and quite unable to stay on terms with the very, very fast Ferrari, but nevertheless driving in a very smooth and confident-looking second place. Michele Alboreto still in 4th place, albeit a lap down, as we watch Tambay on lap 43, 16.8 seconds. Arnoux is getting closer, but that's still not close enough in the remaining 2.5 laps. Keke Rosberg still following Tambay. And as we were saying earlier, Rosberg's engine sounding a little bit flat, so I think that's indication that Tambay is driving to preserve his tyres, driving to preserve his engine. Rosberg 3rd, then Alboreto 4th. Bruno Giacomelli is still 5th after this late charge with the Alpha, which has seen him come up from 8th place to 5th, profiting by the handling problems of Jacques Laffite. And Marc Surer in the points at the moment in 6th place for Arrows. Mauro Baldi in the other Arrows, which started late, has retired. And as always here at Hockenheim, a race of attrition. Jarier out with the Osella, Chiva out, De Cesaris out, Raoul Boesel out, Alain Prost out. Manfred Winkelhock out, Eliseo Salazar, of course, out, as we saw in the collision with the leader Nelson Piquet. And of course, John Watson, sadly out from that 3rd place. 2 laps now to go. This is the penultimate lap for Patrick Tambay. Tambay, the man who I think in the often politically angry world of Formula One racing really can be said not to have an enemy. A charming, always courteous, always polite man. He lives in Cannes, speaks fluent English because he spent a lot of time in America, both as a Can-Am driver and earlier as a skier. He's a skier of Olympic standard. He spent a lot of time in Colorado skiing there. And then, of course, returned to North America to do Can-Am racing when he forsook Formula One. 16.8 seconds the gap, and there you see, of course, everybody else a lap down. So only René Arnoux has escaped the indignity of being lapped by the flying Ferrari of Patrick Tambay, now on its penultimate lap. Still Keke Rosberg following in the Ferrari's wheel tracks. Rosberg in 3rd place, a lap down. Michele Alboreto in the Tyrrell in 4th place, and Brian Henton, incidentally, in the other Tyrrell, the rugged Derbyshire driver, Brian Henton in 7th place in the other Tyrrell. So both the Tyrrells still running, and that's good news for Ken Tyrrell, who, as we were saying earlier, has to do Formula One racing with virtually no sponsorship at the moment. Tambay into the stadium for the penultimate time. Rosberg follows. The crowd in their shirt sleeves ranked through these enormous concrete grandstands. Over that brow at the Opal curve, keeping away from the curbs where it's so slippery, the curbs that have caught out Niki Lauda on Friday and Jacques Laffite not for long ago, and Tambay starts his final lap for the last time. Onto the first long straight. He's in 5th gear now, up into at about 175 miles an hour, up towards the braking area, down to fourth gear as he turns through that right-hand curve into third gear. Now, as the nose dips into the chicane, second gear, bouncing over the bumps. All those great big things that look like enormous concrete blocks are in fact made of polystyrene, so that if a car should hit them, no great damage should be done. On towards the Os curve, 160 miles an hour, briefly in fifth gear, now fourth gear, now third, 70 miles an hour now as he clips the first apex, clips the second, out into fourth gear again, up to fifth gear on the final long straight on his last lap of the 45. Patrick Tambay rowing for home. 180 miles an hour now, the fastest part of the circuit before on the brakes once more. Fourth gear, third gear. Behind you see Michele Alboreto with Nigel Mansell a lap down, but still tucked in behind Alboreto there. Mansell going well. But Tambay now is out of the last chicane. The heat shimmering behind the Ferrari, on the brakes, into the stadium for the last time. And those French flags below me, there is an Italian flag waving in the crowd for Ferrari. French flags below me waving for France, the French driver in the Italian car, out of the Sachs Curva for the last time. Down, that's Rosberg on his way home, but we wait for the flag for Patrick Tambay on the start-finish straight. There is the flag. Patrick Tambay raises both hands victoriously off the wheel. Patrick Tambay has won his first Grand Prix out of 53. And there is René Arnoux coming home in second place, so a good result for him, albeit he didn't repeat his splendid win of 2 weeks ago in France. So Ferrari Turbo first, Renault Turbo second, and to a lot of surprise for a lot of people, a normally aspirated car finishing third, the car following Tambay there, Keke Rosberg. So Rosberg a lap down is third, Michele Alboreto a splendid fourth for Ken Tyrrell. Bruno Giacomelli comes home fifth in the Alfa Romeo, and Marc Surer scoring his third World Championship point of the season with the Arrows. Marc Surer sixth, and Brian Henton has finished in seventh place, so both the Tyrrells finished. That's Derek Daly standing on the verge there, giving a wave to Patrick Tambay. Waves for Tambay from the marshals as he completes his slowing down lap. And we look at the World Championship points. Peroni still the leader. John Watson so unlucky today, still in second place. But Rosberg moves into third place with 27 points. Nothing for Prost today. Nothing, of course, for Lauda, who didn't start. Nothing for Patrese. But René Arnoux moves into equal sixth place. Nothing for Piquet either. So the World Championship still very, very much open. And a race which, perhaps lacking in excitement from time to time, was nevertheless a race full of interest and surprise. It wasn't the turbo walkover that we were all expecting, but it was a wonderful day for this man, Patrick Tambay. And I'm sure that spirits flagging in Italy, in the Ferrari factory, with yesterday's sad news of Peroni, must have been very much restored. There's René Arnoux. More championship points for him. Champagne for Tambay. Water for Keke Rosberg. The French flag and the French national anthem. So Patrick Tambay wins his first Grand Prix. 33 years old, always consistent, never until now one of the front runners, but in the most competitive of Grand Prix cars, doing everything that could be expected of him. A very, very smooth, mature and competent drive from Patrick Tambay, and the 720 horsepower of that Ferrari engine, just more than René Arnoux on the left could do. And I think a relieved Keke Rosberg there. We understand that Rosberg's engine was very sick at the end, so a splendid third place for him. And now just a week of respite before we look ahead to the Austrian Grand Prix. Next Sunday we'll be in the centre of Austria in the Steiermark Mountains, the Österreich Ring, for round 13 of the World Championship.